What do you do when you use your emergency fund? In life, it is guaranteed that unexpected things will always come our way. Whether that's something like an appliance breaking down, or something more drastic like losing your job or having a medical emergency in the family. It is for these unexpected reasons why saving up for an emergency fund is necessary if you want peace of mind and a sense of stability in your finances. But what should you do when there is indeed an emergency and you use it up? What's the right way to think about rebuilding it? That's what we'll answer in this episode. Number 1. Assess. Was it really an emergency? The first step when you use up your emergency fund is to ask the question, was it really an emergency? And be honest in answering this one. Because isn't it true that in today's world, the lines of what needs and wants are have become blurred? We live in an age where Wi-Fi and coffee have become needs and branded apparel have become the norm. And it's okay to say, I need this or that as an expression. As an effect, there are many people out there with a distorted sense of reality on what an emergency really is. Because when it comes to financial matters, we all need to learn to tell what an emergency is and isn't. Because if we let the small things in life become emergencies, there is a great danger of not having enough funds when the real hard-hitting emergencies hit, like losing one's job or getting diagnosed with a critical illness. So first step, assess. Was it really because of an emergency? Or was it because of an impulsive decision? Was it because of the lack of planning, wherein the budget was wrong in the first place? Think about that first. Then, when you have assessed the cause, the next step is, number 2, be grateful. If it was a real emergency, then be grateful that you had the emergency fund. Thank your past self that they had the wisdom to set aside money for the things that were unpredictable. There's no need to feel bad that you used up your emergency fund. Be grateful that you had an emergency fund in the first place. Because imagine if the fund wasn't there. You might have had to borrow money and get into debt, or you might have had to beg and be a burden on someone else. So be grateful you had an emergency fund. Now, if the cause of the spending was not really an emergency, and in your honest assessment, it was due to an impulsive decision or the lack of planning, then the next step is still be grateful. Be grateful for the financial lesson. Now that you know you have this impulse to spend on this thing, maybe it's the budget that needs adjustment. Maybe it's possible that the lesson here is that you've been depriving yourself too much, or maybe you're not planning for the special events in your life, or the things that happen regularly, like the car needing maintenance, the appliance needing to be replaced after 5 years, and so on. The unpredictable spend that made you use your emergency fund contains lessons. So, take time to be grateful that you have an emergency fund and take the additional benefit of learning the lesson behind it. Next step, number 3, focus on the most important thing. After you've made an honest assessment if it was really an emergency and you've patted yourself on the back for at least having an emergency fund, the next step is to not yet rebuild the emergency fund. Instead, it's to focus on the most important thing. Listen, if you used up the emergency fund because someone in the family got sick, then providing medical assistance to them is the most important thing. Who cares if you don't have an emergency fund? That's not important. Their health is what is most important. Now, we don't know exactly what emergency you had to go through or you're going through right now, but this episode is meant to give you permission to not have an emergency fund. It's okay. Focus on what's important first. And when things have settled, whether that's a month, 3 months, or 6 months, when you are ready, then that's the time you start thinking about rebuilding your emergency fund. This brings us to step number 4, rebuild. After you have dealt with the most important thing that caused the emergency and you're ready to rebuild, here is how to do that. So, let's say before the emergency, you're in a great financial position. You had 6 months worth of your expenses. You were regularly investing in stocks. You were saving up for the college tuition of your kids or for your dream travel, so on and so forth. Then bam! Emergency hits you out of nowhere. You use up your entire emergency fund. Maybe you even had to take out some funds from your investments. So you do the steps here. You allow yourself to feel grateful that you had an emergency fund. You focused on the most important thing and now you're ready to rebuild. The first priority is to save up 1 month's worth of your expenses. You can pause everything else. You can skip adding to your investments or retirement funds while you rebuild. And if your insurance plans allow for it, inquire if you can pause or skip payments without losing coverage. 100% of your excess funds and savings can be devoted into building up 1 month worth of your expenses. After you have built up the 1 month, then you can split up the allocations to your other goals. It's up to you to decide the numbers, but just as an example, it can be 50% of your savings every month goes to the emergency fund, while 20% to retirement and 30% to your travel fund. I don't know your goals right now, but the idea is, after you build the 1 month emergency fund, you don't have to obsess about rebuilding it ASAP. You've got other goals you're saving for, so feel free to allocate money to those. And you keep doing it until you rebuild your emergency funds to the level before the emergency happened. And that's it for our guide on what do you do when you use your emergency fund. As our final message for this episode, remember that the purpose of the emergency fund is for an emergency. Of course, we hope and pray you never have to use it, but in the event that you do, it's okay to use it up because that's its purpose. Hey there, quick question. Do you ever feel guilty whenever you make a big purchase? Like when you spend money for yourself? Because you're already financially literate and you know how to save and invest. So kapag bumibili ka ng malaki and you're thinking, sayang, dapat inipon ko na lang, ininvest ko na lang. Well, if you're thinking that, if you've ever felt that way, I've got news for you. That's actually normal. Because there are 3 types of people. Number 1, the people who spend too much and they don't know they're headed for financial disaster. And then there's also people who save too much and they end up missing out on life because they save. But there is actually a 3rd type. And these are the people who know the art of guilt-free spending. They know the balance of spending and saving. Now, if you feel that you're a little bit extreme on one side na puro ipon na lang or puro spending na lang, there's a healthy way to balance that out. And just go to pinoymoneyacademy.com/GFS for guilt-free spending. And you can discover how the art of guilt-free spending can help you. Again, the link is pinoymoneyacademy.com/GFS to learn more about the art of guilt-free spending.